over. That's good, we found it, holy hall.
Hey, Lionel, what are you doing?
Oh.
I know you're a Hollywood guy, but
agent.
cell phones are
it's my
off
agent.
during the show.
It's my agent. He has nothing for me.
Your agent has nothing for you, but we have something for the public.
Yes, we
Here
do.
we're back with Hollywood, and our cell phones are down, and we are going to be discussing, as promised, Quentin Tarantino's Inglorious Bastards. What do you think of it?
To my surprise, almost chagrin, I really liked it. I thought it was a terrific film. I really loved this film. I liked it because, first of all, it was intelligently written. It was a fantasy. I thought I was going to hate it, okay? I thought it was just another silly Hollywood adventure, but it wasn't. It was actually a very interesting fantasy. I thought incredibly well made. You know, Bob Fosse used to say, if you jam your camera against the side of the wall, he used to tell me, he said doing something like Hanoi Hilton, get up against the wall. He said, you're going to see the audience go the other way to try and look around the corner. This is not giving anything away if you haven't seen the film. There's an opening shot with a piece of laundry. It's the opening shot, in fact, of a sheet on a line.
Right.
And you know there's something behind that sheet. And I found myself doing this. It's a modern vocabulary of film. It's Quentin Tarantino, who is a public personality I find irritating, almost boring. Unbelievably clever. I just thought it was terrific. I liked it. I thought it was a very well written script. I thought the fantasy part of it was very clever. I thought Brad Pitt was good. I can't fault the film. So I'm going to vote for it.
Well, I might vote for it too because it was a bad year. I thought it was pretty good. I didn't love it. The interesting thing about it is that I really liked it too, and I usually don't like Tarantino because I'm squeamish. He gets too violent for me, except when he's very good. When he's really good, which was obviously in Pulp Fiction, he was as prime, I'm with him. And there are moments here that I'm really with him. And then when he's scalping people, I go, well, I don't need to see this stuff.
Except, you know, his treatment of, this is really interesting, I learned something about this too, about, you know, maturing in terms of filmmaking. I'm a pretty mature guy by now, don't have much further to go. But there's a film within a film.
Yes.
And the film within the film is about
violence.
That.
Explain.
The story involves the making of a film and the exhibition of a film. And that film is about violence
in France during the Nazi period.
during the Nazi occupation. And what you get, which was also a fantasy, of course, in its own way, deals with violence on screen and comments upon it and shows the darkness of violence and how it impacts on an audience better than any of his critics could. I mean,
I understand.
I don't want to give the thing away, but it's a war film. Joseph Goebbels is in the audience, but wonderfully portrayed, by the way. Except the limp wasn't exaggerated enough. But the story of a German sniper who kills hundreds upon hundreds, thousands of Frenchmen, and you see the enjoyment of the Germans. He turns you into, he develops your taste for violence. It's a very mature film. It's the work of a mature filmmaker. This film, we talk about how films don't stand up with the 40s and the 50s and so on. Mm-hmm. This film does. I
think it does too. And I think it's really smart. And I think it's one of those film buff films that actually works.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you got to give it to the guy. He's the film buff of all time. He's legendarily, you know, a video rental clerk who made the heights of the film business, and he's seen everything. I mean, we may have seen a lot. This guy has seen everything, and he comments on it, and he does it smartly. In this one, there's a lot of stuff on resistance filmmaking. And then on the one hand, Leni Riefenstahl on the other. Who was on what side in France in World War II?
It's a complete vocabulary.
And he's got it pretty clear.
He takes a deal at Emil Jannings, too, which I thought was really interesting.
Right.
He has a complete vocabulary. But there was one thing I noticed, too, going, and I thought, oh, my God, here we go. Early on in the film, for reasons that just seemed to me, oh, what a cheap trick to con your audience. And suddenly the German and the Frenchman start speaking English. Within about 10 minutes, it becomes apparent that was not a con. There was a real reason why he had them speaking English.
Of course.
I mean, everything in it is thought out, everything in it is paid off, and it's what films are supposed to be. And it left me feeling I need to see it 2 or 3 more times. You know, I'm about to go off and do it. It left me feeling I have things to learn from the way Quentin Tarantino now makes films.
Oh, I agree with that.
You know,
but it's the same guy, though, who was there in Pulp Fiction. There was some pretty talented stuff in that, too.
There was, but you watch it grow. This film is a complete film. To me, it's a complete film.
Let me ask you a question about the violence, because the violence of Tarantino, and look, violence is a personal issue. I first heard about Tarantino, as most of us did, when he made Reservoir Dogs. Oh, these many years ago, like in the early '90s.
Hated it.
Well,
Couldn't
that
watch
was it was a short film, but it was like 80 minutes of unremitting violence.
I lasted about 10 minutes.
Well, I think, made it through it, as I recall, because I was being hyped to death about this guy. But I'm thinking,
tougher than
what's
me,
the big
yeah.
deal? All he's doing is using a lot of blood machines. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
and he got Harvey Keitel, who's a good actor. I'm in the story. I'm in the cleverness of it. I'm in the suspense of it. I'm in the threat of violence. And then when he shows me this really unreal violence, all of a sudden I pop out.
Well, I think two things are happening. I think number one, there are two films going on there, which is kind of interesting. One is Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies. One is a cartoon. One is the Roadrunner. Hitler didn't die in a theater. I mean, all of
Right.
that part of it is amusing, and
accept
Churchill
that.
singing. So that's the Looney Tunes. That's
Right.
Tom and Jerry. It's Bugs Bunny, and it's a cartoon, and that's great. I put the scalpings in that. I put the scalpings in the cartoon thing. I have to expect these guys to get up and say, "Eric, my new hairdo." I mean, it was almost that kind of Sylvester the Cat thing. But there was another film going on as well, and the fact that he married the two together speaks to some sort of very clever film vocabulary or ability to make films.
No, an original man.
Because
no question.
and that violence somehow didn't offend me. There's a film within the film which is about violence on film and how it affects an audience. But the first piece of violence is very cleverly done. It's violence to a floorboard.
Look.
I mean, it's just he brings you into it gradually. He earns the right. He earns the right to be violent to you. That's what I'm saying.
See, that's where I check out slightly. And here's what I mean. I totally like the floorboard thing. I'm totally with it. I believed it. See, that was a highly real scene.
Yeah.
And it was beautifully filmed. It was the best scene in the movie in many ways. And then when he has Brad Pitt and the others becoming Jewish wild Indians, which was what they were, off there scalping Nazi scalps.
It didn't offend me.
It didn't offend me, but I check out. And I checked out in those
For
parts.
some reason, this did not offend me. I dealt with it as a cartoon. Even the final scene didn't offend me. But in terms of violence, there's a scene in the basement that goes. It's a very long scene.
Right.
I'd never be allowed to have a scene that long, and nor would you. But he's Quentin Tarantino. He was permitted to have a scene that long in his film. It's a long film, and he earns that. He earned that. It is the tension. He builds the tension to an unbearable point, and then when the violence comes, it comes and goes in an instant. The old Quentin Tarantino would have paid that scene off with a bloodbath, splattering the lens, but he
Right.
didn't. It was brilliant, and it was done.
Because the fun of all those scenes, I agree with you. The fun of those scenes is the suspense. And he is
I want to see his next film. I
I
think this
do.
guy
Look.
may turn out to be like a Bob Fosse-sized filmmaker.
You might be right. I mean, you really might be right, and I agree with you completely.
I
on
would
one
be
thing.
chagrined. I would be chagrined because he's not what I imagined to be the guy who's going to return art to Hollywood film. Okay,
I again agree
not what
with
I
you,
want.
but I don't care that much now. I'm grateful for being entertained. And
it's
one thing
great
about the
movie.
guy is he's really entertaining.
Yes, and here's the thing that I really loved about the film, relating to other things we have discussed. He has done a fable of history, something that didn't happen, but something in one's fevered imagination one wishes could have happened. And most Americans get their history, well, largely through television. But to the extent that he is dabbling in an alternative history, bless his heart, because this is not the alternative history of a Matt Damon or an Oliver Stone or any of these other people. It has a clear moral sense of who's right and who's wrong. Yes, it is like Indians. There are good guys and there are bad guys, and there is no there is no nuance. the great liberal word that begins with N, nuance. He understands. He tells you. He gives you an alternative fable of history that is somehow satisfying to those of us who think that Hitler was a bad guy, Germans weren't nice, Nazism is not good, and that we were on the right side in World War II.
Well,
and you know what? You don't get that in Hollywood.
You sure don't. And with that, we're going to move on to the next Oxford Pictures next week. This is Roger Simon.
And Lionel Chetwood.
See you in Bollywood.
Hooray for Hollywood. That's good way, Bobby. Hooray, Hollywood.